Hey, Composer Gloves here, and today is a 3 oscillator plug-in tutorial. So we are going to be talking about AM modulation in the phase randomness. Okay, so phase randomness knob is really easy. All it does is randomizes the phase of all of these of the 3 oscillators. So I'm going to start with that one. So remember the phase offset button? Well, this is sort of like that, only it just randomizes it as if we have something randomizing this every single time. Wow, I just snapped my jaw. That was really my jaw feels a lot more comfortable now. There's a very easy way to hear this. So let's go down. Let's put down a bunch of A's. So let's just put down a bunch of A's here. And you know the drill. A, whatever. Okay, then we'll make it interesting. We'll make it minor. And then go ahead and just clone it a couple of times. Ooh, don't clone it a couple of times. Do that. Otherwise, it will be off. Okay. Now, to hear it, ideally, before, if we wanted to hear this, we were to hit a bunch of A's. We wanted to hear the difference in change. We'll use a saw wave. Very noticeable on a saw wave. Turn these down for now. Right, that's what it would sound like, right? If we were to move that around. So if we were to move the phase randomness around, check it out. So pretty simple thing, makes a big difference, and it immediately introduces a stereo offset. Now, if we included the other oscillators in here, so yeah, this, of course, the old analog stuff couldn't exactly reproduce stuff the exact same way every single time. So you were much more likely to get something that was a little off but much closer to consistent. This is more of an effect when you turn it all the way on. So it's just offsetting the phase of the 3 oscillators, and it does it to each of them individually, so you don't have to automate this at all. It'll do it for you. So that's like old school, right? That sounds old. Now we have an AM oscillator. This will turn oscillator 3 into a modulator for oscillators 1 and 2. So go watch my video on modulation if you're unsure what this is. And on the subject of RM, I would recommend my video in Citrus on what ring modulation is. It is essentially the same thing as RM. So AM modulation is called amplitude modulation. You may have heard of it when you're talking about the radio, but this is in the audio spectrum. So you will be able to hear it modulating stuff in the audio spectrum. I'm going to talk about this theoretically, and then I'll show you some examples of it real quick. So what is amplitude modulation? Well, you have a signal. Let's say you've got a signal at 100 hertz. Let me pull out some sort of a visual. Let's go to Citrus, visual it up, and we need a sine wave. Okay, so here you have a signal, right? It's going up and down, and then you send another signal to it that's probably different, and so it gets sent into this signal. And whenever this signal is so this signals are sound, right? So it's like positive, negative, like it's compressing and refracting, la 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 la. This one, it says when you get to your peak, when you compress, we want you to get louder. So we reach a loudness, and then when we get down here, we want you to be softer, and then all the stuff in between is on average, we want you to get softer, maximum softness, louder, maximum loudness. And so instead of it being a sound, it is a controller source to control the amplitude. Now, if they're the exact same frequency, then that's all fine and dandy. If it's like 100 hertz and 100 hertz, it's really interesting because this means that they're going to sum and difference at some point. What does this mean for you? Well, if you have like a frequency at 100 hertz and you are amplitude modulating it from a signal at 200 hertz, let's say you do that, you'll get the sum and difference of those two tones. So you have it's a little more difficult to explain here because they use the not a weird scale tone system. This is a very, very common scale tone system, but you can't control hertz values exactly. So I'm just going to tell you what would happen. And you're just going to have to believe me. Or you could go watch my video on ring modulation. And it's basically the same thing. We'll get to that. So let's say you've got a sine tone at 100 hertz and a sine tone at 200 hertz. Well, if you were to amplitude modulate it, the 100 hertz would stay. Like it would hang around because it's amplitude modulation. Ring modulation, if you're doing it all the way, it would go away. So amplitude modulation. So it'll be 100 hertz plus 200 hertz. So that's 300 hertz. So you'd get a 300 hertz tone out of there, and then 100 hertz plus the 200 hertz from the amplitude modulation would be negative 100 hertz. We're subtracting now, so 100 minus 200, so you get 100, and then if it's negative, it just gets flipped back into the spectrum. So it's like, oh, now it's 100 hertz, which we already had. So 100 hertz, we get louder, and that would be pretty much what would happen. Not like a huge shocker. So we have AM oscillator 3. You know what? I'm not 100% sure if it would get louder. Just a little disclaimer. I'm pretty sure it would get louder. But let me see. Now the difference between ring modulation is the same thing. What is the difference? So, well, the difference is the tone, the fundamental tone of the modulator does not get into it doesn't get into your carrier source. So whatever source is the source that's making the noise, that's your carrier. Whatever source is the source controlling the amplitude, that is your modulator. So let me open up an analyzer here so you can sort of see this. Now, there are some easy ways to sort of see it, but then there's some more difficult ways. And then there's the practical way. And now I'm going to throw out a sentence that's a little confusing. That is, this happens for well, it's not that confusing, I guess. This happens for every harmonic in your carrier source. So every harmonic gets its own, it'll say any sinusoidal component. And so that's sort of a fancy way of saying it. I'm not really going to go much further than that, because then you're going to start you'll start thinking pretty hard. And it's just going to be an introduction to AM. It's really easy. Honestly, if you make like a plugin that's just a volume knob that turns on and off at audio rate, you've essentially got a form of AM. Now, there is another difference between AM modulation and our ring modulation, which is AM modulation. Now, I'm not sure if this is like 100% true all the time, or because I'm not sure if it's like mislabeled, but it is a unipolar modulation. What does that mean? Well, there's a consistent offset. So you know how your signal normally goes above and down, up and down? That is ring modulation. It's bipolar. It's used the same. So there's two poles. There's a positive and a negative. In unipolar modulation, it's only up and then down to zero. So it doesn't go down to negative. It's just positive, zero, positive, zero all the time. And it has it changes the timbral content of your signal differently. So this is another new piece of information. AM modulation is meant to change the timbral characteristics of your sound. Now, you should be familiar with that term from my Sounds with Basics, but here's a quick refresher. We know if we play sound, we get a spectrum. This spectrum is referred to as our timbre. However this series is made up. This first tone is our fundamental, and then this is noise. So this is, okay, that's really great and dandy. Now, what this means is when we amplitude modulate individual so these are all sinusoidal components. These are the harmonics, right? And as we modulate them and move them, we're going to be changing the structure, thus changing the timbre of our tone. So pretty complicated mumbo jumbo. Let's really quick give it a look. I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. Okay. Oh, and I need to zoom in that way. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to be playing some lower tones. Trying to find one that just sits. Oh, it has to appear across the whole thing. I guess not. Never mind. Okay, so we're going to turn on this to be. So first off, let's start with some pretty simple dimple. We'll turn all this stuff off, and we'll turn this to 24. Okay. Now I'm going to turn my AM modulation on, and I'm going to leave it at a sine wave of 0. So it's a very, very slow modulation. And then I'm going to increase the pitch as we go. So I'm going to stop right there. So you see there is a clear up and down motion that is grouping of them on and off. That is because our tone here is lower than our tone up here. And you can see the frequency. There it is. There's our frequency. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. That right there is our frequency that we're modulating it by. Now, there's a couple... Well, that's pretty much it. Now, I'm going to show you some examples now. You notice that when they're in line, they add one side adds up to B itself, so it doesn't really do anything. It leaves our original component there unaffected. Yeah, I'll just play it for you, show you. There's still a very big difference though. It's not unaffected. It's just its effect is not. It is in sync. The sinusoidal components are happening in the harmonic spectrum. So the change that happens is a static change, meaning you don't hear it changing over time, versus over here, this is not in the same harmonic spectrum. It's a dissonance. And so you hear a change over time, like a consistent change over time, but it's still changing. Here, it's a static change with it off. That's what it should be. But we get a sort of a sine wave thing. So now let's talk about some of the applications of what this is. So a lot of people will reach for these sorts of things when they want to. So there's a number of things that come from knowing what this is that allows you to be more creative than someone who just knows that it makes sounds crunchier usually. So that's what people will usually reach for is, oh yeah, it makes my sound crunchier. Now, you know that if you have a crazy complicated signal, that this thing's going to make and it's going to change your sidebands entirely, which could be a good or bad thing. You'll notice that when we do it, a sine wave against, so you notice right now, let me do this. Never mind. I was going to make a statement, but I just realized that I'm thinking of frequency modulation, not AM modulation. So one thing is, you notice that when we get that, you know it's going to be a timbral change, so you can make decisions about that. You know also that now we haven't talked about low frequencies versus high frequencies, but you can see the implications are pretty straightforward. If maybe you have a sound with a lot of resonance in one little spot, you could use AM modulation to multiply your bands out because, you know, it's a sum and difference. So if you use like a wide value, you'll spread your harmonics out a little bit more. So it won't be so focused in that one spot. It's a good way to deal with things like that. There are methods. We're going to make some of these things too. When you use a low frequency, you'll understand that means that just the harmonics, the sum and difference will be closer. Bigger frequencies mean farther. And if you have like a soft sound, you could use this if you use it lightly, you could use it to add some nice subtle touches and maybe not go all the way, just go up a little bit. Now, I'm pretty sure I already said this, but AM modulation leaves the original component in there. The modulating component leaves the fundamental alone. Whereas in RM, that is not the case. The modulating component should not show itself. But if you do it like halfway, then it's going to like be there. It's a little weird. Yes. So, okay, let's make some stuff. We are going to make, again, go watch my video in Citrus. I show you like the signal being there until it's all the way on. So, okay, we're going to make a thing. So right off the bat, let's just say that this is our line that we have going on here, right? We want to make it more interesting. We could just do this. Let's modulate it by. Now it gets really kind of crazy when you're using a saw wave and then you're modulating it by a saw wave. It just gets crazy. Okay, so don't worry too much about the sum and differences. You're changing timbral characteristics is the main point right now. We're not like making an AM synthesis engine and trying to understand everything that it does. One thing also, you might be wondering, why do well, I'm going to say octaves. If you know music theory, if you don't know this, you need to watch my MIDI music theory course. If you go up in octaves, you see that 12 tones is a nice sound because it's the same note. That's an octave thing. So you need to go look up MIDI music theory if you are like lost. It really is valuable knowledge music theory is in sound design. It's sort of like tiny music theory. So yeah, you see I can use this here to make some interesting changes. If I let me go ahead and automate the volume of our, now it's our modulating operator, so we could turn it on over time. One thing that'd be kind of cool, let's say that we wanted to do something like that, we could create an automation clip. And so this is at 12, right? We know that this is at 12. Let's say we wanted to reach 12 right here. Well, we wanted to bend down to 12. So we're gonna make this. Let's say we want to go up for now. You could do the other one. It's just not as convenient, but it's very easy to do still. So, oh, I lengthened everything out. Okay. So what you do is you come in here and then you want to copy. So let's say you want to move this up to 24. So we're going to copy value. Then you come back to your mixer and you say, hey, I want you to go up to that value. And then you can paste it. It'll go there and you're done. But let's say you want it to stay that way, except let's say you want it to do it only the last 2 bars. Or if you could just have it switch, which is probably what most of you guys are going to want to do anyways. So some interesting ways. Modulating the pitch changes the frequency of the amplitude modulation, changing your harmonic structure, which is something I highly recommend doing. Now, it'd be interesting to do something like we use a square wave there. You can hear this one's kind of weird because it's got that hump near the beginning or the end, whatever, near the beginning of the cycle. At least in the picture it does. Now, a quick note about noise. You will see noise used in all the time. Like people will oftentimes layer in noise because it takes up a lot of the emptiness in a sound. So in this sound, it's already pretty full of sound, but sometimes people will add a noise, especially when they're going for layers. They'll nearly always have some sort of a noisier layer, not necessarily noise itself, but something that is a lot more noisy because it just fills it up, makes it sound nice. You add a little bit of reverb, it sounds quite good actually. So let's look at how this can affect a pad. So we're going to make pad sound. Let's go to default. And so I'm going to come up a couple octaves and we're going to make a pad sound. So to do a pad sound real quick, I'm going to use, I'm pretty happy with this already. I'm going to phase offset these things a touch and detune them just a little bit. I'm going to use AM on 3 again. I'm going to turn 3 off just to hear it without the modulation. That's what we get, right? Then I'm going to turn on my envelope over here. We haven't talked about this, but we will. So we have some sort of pad, turn my decay up a little. Or not my decay, my release. So nice, right? And now I'm going to add a reverb. I hit Control L to do that if you are like, whoa, how do you get it there? So I'm going to add a reverb and now I want it to be a little less detuned. You see we have a nice stereo image signal thing. So now we are going to introduce, oh, my modulation turned on. So now we're going to introduce our modulation and we are going to sort of mess with it. So now you have a way to make some, if we turn our attack way up, check this out. Now I've introduced this. Now this is a very complicated sound because we have generated a spectrum. If we were to do things with like a saw wave, you'll notice with the sine wave we get sort of a metallic component from this. That is a result of things being slightly off of the harmonic spectrum. Like normally things are like right on, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For the saw wave series and the square wave series, you should know about this stuff because it's in my sound synth basics. Knowing that type of series, if we deviate from it a little bit, we get very metallic textures very quickly. So using an interesting offset of like 16, it'd be even cooler. Yeah, very interesting thing. Now, another thing you can try. Let me take the reverb, turn the decay. I'm okay with the decay. Maybe just low cut. Okay, so one thing else that you could try with this. So with the, now we've been using sine waves. If we use something with a bigger spectrum, you'll notice that there's a lot more fundamental. The harmonic structure is a lot more reinforced. With sine waves, there's no spectrum. And so any variation off of it is very easy to do because you're using it and it's already being detuned at the source. When you do it with the saw wave, a lot of the series has already been written down. So let's go back to the sine wave real quick. There's like only a couple textures, and that's another thing that bell tones have is they only have a couple of harmonics. So that works out well, and they're an octave apart. It just works out. Now over here, we have introduced a harmonic series, so it's already there. So it's not like when we hear a tone, we want to perceive a harmonic series. At least we're geared to sort of do it. And so when only a couple of tones appear and we don't hear the tone, we hear sort of a metallic thing. This time we're going to have harmonic spectrums. They'll be a little bit off, so we'll get an interesting sort of tone, but it won't be enough to really throw us off too far. So we'll lose a lot of the metallic side. So a lot of that bleed is coming from my reverb. Turn that off. Oh, not my reverb. What am I saying? It's my long release. So pretty cool. Now, ring modulation. So that's a ring. That's A modulation. I think of it in ring modulation. It's not a good thing, but I know what the difference is, so it's not that too big a deal. Now again, modulating this is cool. Modulating this is cool. Now, they don't have internal controller sources, but what you can do is you can go to create automation clip, and on it, you can turn it into an LFO. So now it's an LFO, as you can see. And what you do is you click on the automation to bring up the properties, and you can like mess with things like speed, tension, skew, stuff like that. Now this is on this one's not being affected by it. We need no. Am I doing that one? I am. It is being affected by it, but my sounds are too short. So let's just go ahead. Just make a new pattern. It was not linked. Something's weird. Okay, so let's go to the default. What is the name of this thing? OS3C mix level. Okay. link to controller. Let's remix level. We'll do it one more time. Something is awry. Is it going now? Yeah, it's going now. Okay, so if I turn this to an LFO. There we go. So you can hear it doing its thing. You can make some really cool sounds like that too. And that's a way to sort of automate it if you are having problems with it. This is something that might be easier in another plugin, to be real. But yes, if you have any questions about this, let me know. I tried to give you some good examples and go through, play a little bit, show you some of it. Because some of this is sound design. Some of this is the compositional side of things. Like how good are you going to get at the compositional side is going to determine a lot of how much your sound design even matters. Unless you're doing like sound effects, then it doesn't kind of matter, but it still kind of does because, well, I guess it doesn't. It doesn't matter if you're just doing sound effects. Unless if you disagree, drop Y in the comments, I guess. Subscribe and have a blessed day.